The Whispers of Bhangarh. My name is Arjun, and I'm not the kind of person who believes in ghosts. I've always thought stories about haunted places were just that, stories. Exaggerations spun by bored locals or overactive imaginations. That's what I told myself when I decided to visit Bhangarh Fort in Rajasthan, India, last summer. It was supposed to be a quick stop, a detour on my way to Jaipur for a work conference. I'd heard the rumors. Of course, everyone in India knows about Bhangarh, the so-called most haunted place in the country. But I'm a skeptic. I figured I'd snap a few photos, maybe post them online with a sarcastic caption, and move on with my life. That's not what happened. It was late June, and the heat was relentless. I'd rented a beat-up Maruti Suzuki from a sketchy agency in Alwar, the nearest town, and drove the 50 kilometers to Bhangarh on a dusty road that seemed to stretch into eternity. The landscape was stark dry, rocky hills dotted with scraggly trees, the kind of place that makes you feel small and exposed. My phone's GPS kept glitching, dropping the signal every few minutes, but I eventually spotted the faded sign for Bhangarh Fort, pointing toward a narrow path off the main road. I parked near a cluster of chai stalls, where a few locals were lounging under a banyan tree, their eyes following me as I grabbed my backpack and camera. The fort itself was smaller than I'd expected, a crumbling relic of the 16th century, surrounded by parched fields in the Aravalli Hills. Its stone walls were weathered, stained by centuries of sun and monsoon rains, but there was something oddly captivating about it. The main gate, flanked by two massive towers, stood open, and beyond it, I could see the ruins of what had once been a bustling town, temples, Havelis, and a marketplace, all abandoned. A faded government sign near the entrance warned visitors not to stay after sunset, citing safety concerns. I smirked. Probably just a way to keep vandals out. I wasn't alone. A handful of tourists milled about, mostly college kids taking selfies, and a couple of foreigners with guidebooks. There was also a local guide, a wiry man named Vikram, who offered to show me around for 200 rupees. I agreed, mostly because I wanted to hear the local spin on the place. Vikram was chatty, his English broken but enthusiastic. He pointed out the Gopinath temple, the royal palace, and the remains of a dancer's quarters, all while rattling off the usual ghost stories. According to him, Bhangarh was cursed by a tantric priest named Singya, who'd fallen in love with the fort's princess Ratnavati. When she rejected him, he tried to cast a spell to win her heart, but it backfired, dooming the entire town. Everyone died, some say, overnight, and their spirits never left. People hear things, Vikram said, lowering his voice as we stood in the shadow of the palace. Whispers, footsteps, sometimes screams. You don't come here at night, Sahib. Bad things happen. I nodded politely, suppressing a grin. It was a good story, the kind that probably kept tourists coming. But I wasn't here for ghost stories. I wanted to explore, take some photos, and maybe find a quiet spot to sketch the ruins. I thanked Vikram, slipped him a tip, and wandered off on my own. The fort was eerily quiet, even with the other tourists around. The air felt heavy, like the heat was pressing down on me, and the only sounds were the crunch of my sneakers on the gravel and the occasional caw of a crow. I wandered through the marketplace, its stone arches still standing, and climbed the steps to the royal palace. The view from the top was stunning. The fort sprawled below, framed by the hills, with the sun hanging low in the sky. I checked my watch. 4:30 p.m., plenty of time before dusk. I found a shaded spot near the palace's outer wall and sat down to sketch. The wall was carved with intricate patterns, faded but still beautiful, and I lost myself in capturing the details. That's when I first noticed a faint sound, like someone whispering just out of earshot. I stopped, pencil hovering over my sketchbook, and listened. Nothing, just the wind, I told myself, though the air was still. I went back to sketching, but the feeling lingered, like I was being watched. I glanced around, half expecting to see one of the other tourists nearby, but the courtyard below was empty. The college kids had left, and the foreigners were nowhere in sight. By 5:30, the light was starting to fade, and the fort felt emptier than before. I packed up my things and decided to explore a bit more before heading back to my car. That's when I stumbled across the door. It was set into the base of a crumbling tower, half hidden behind a pile of rubble. Unlike the rest of the fort, which was open to the elements, this door was intact solid wood, reinforced with iron bands, and carved with symbols I didn't recognize. They weren't the usual Rajput motifs. These were angular, almost rune-like, and they gave me a strange feeling, like they were meant to keep something in rather than out. I tried the handle, but it wouldn't budge. The door was locked, or maybe stuck. and there was no keyhole or latch that I could see. I pressed my ear against the wood, curious, and that's when I heard it again, the whispering. It was clearer this time, a low murmur that seemed to come from the other side of the door. Words, maybe, but in a language I couldn't understand. My heart gave a sharp thud, and I stepped back, suddenly aware of how alone I was. I told myself it was nothing, maybe an echo from somewhere else in the fort, or my imagination playing tricks. But the air felt colder now, and the shadows seemed longer. I checked my watch again, 6 o'clock p.m. The sun was dipping below the hills, and the sky was turning a deep, bruised purple. I decided it was time to leave. As I made my way back toward the main gate, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The fort was too quiet, no birds, no insects, just the sound of my own footsteps. And then I heard it, a faint, rhythmic tapping, like someone knocking on wood. It was coming from behind me, from the direction of the tower. I froze, my breath catching in my throat, and turned around. Nothing, just the empty courtyard and the darkening ruins. But the tapping didn't stop. It was slow, deliberate, and it seemed to follow me as I hurried toward the gate. By the time I reached my car, my hands were shaking. The chai stalls were deserted, the locals gone, and the banyan tree loomed like a silent sentinel in the twilight. I threw my backpack into the back seat and started the engine, but it sputtered and died. I tried again, nothing. The battery was fine. I'd checked it that morning, but the car refused to start. Panic crept in, and I glanced back at the fort. The towers were just silhouettes now, but I could have sworn I saw something move in the shadows near the gate. A figure, maybe, or just a trick of the light. I grabbed my phone to call for help, but the screen showed no signal, not a single bar, despite working fine earlier. I cursed under my breath and decided to walk back to the main road to find help. But as I stepped out of the car, I heard it again, the whispering. It was louder now, coming from all directions, like a chorus of voices just beyond comprehension. I spun around, scanning the darkness, but there was nothing, just the fort, silent and still, and the endless stretch of empty road. I don't know why I didn't start walking. Maybe it was fear, or maybe it was something else, but I felt drawn back to the fort, like I needed to know what was behind that door. It was a stupid thought, reckless even, but it was like a hook in my chest, pulling me forward. I grabbed my flashlight from the glove compartment and headed back through the gate. The fort was pitch black now, the only light coming from my flashlight and the faint glow of the moon. The air was thick, oppressive, and the whispering was constant, rising and falling like a tide. I made my way back to the tower, my beam cutting through the darkness, and found the door exactly as I'd left it. I tried the handle again, harder this time, but it still wouldn't move. The whispering grew louder, more insistent, and I pressed my ear to the door again. This time, I could make out a single word, repeated over and over. Raja King. It meant king. My blood ran cold. I stumbled back, my flashlight shaking in my hand, and that's when I saw it, a shadow, tall and regal, standing at the edge of the courtyard. It wasn't human, not exactly. Its form was too sharp, too defined, like it had been carved from the darkness itself. It wore a crown or something like one, and its eyes, God, its eyes wore two burning points of light that seemed to see right through me. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The whispering stopped, and for a moment, there was only silence. Then the shadow spoke. Open the door, it said, its voice low and resonant, like it was coming from inside my skull. Open it, and know the truth. I don't know how long I stood there, frozen, staring at the thing. Seconds, minutes, but then it moved, gliding toward me, and I bolted. I ran through the fort, my flashlight bouncing wildly, tripping over stones and roots until I reached the main gate. I didn't look back. I couldn't. I kept running until I hit the main road, where I flagged down a passing truck. The driver, an old man with a weathered face, didn't ask questions. He just drove me to Ulwa, where I checked into a cheap hotel and spent the night staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. The next morning, I went back for my car. It started without a hitch, like nothing had happened. I didn't go back into the fort. I couldn't. But as I drove away, I kept thinking about the door, the whispering, and that shadow. What was behind it? Why did it call me Raja? I've tried to rationalize it, dehydration, maybe even some kind of hallucination, but I can shake the feeling that something in Bhangarh wanted me to stay, to open that door, to see what was on the other side. I haven't told anyone about this, not my friends, not my family. They'd think I was crazy, and maybe I am, but sometimes, at night, I hear it again, the whispering. It's faint, barely there, but it's the same voice, calling me back. And the worst part, a part of me wants to go, to find that door and open it, to know the truth, whatever it is. I don't know what's real anymore. I don't know if I ever will. But if you're reading this and you ever find yourself near Bhangarh, do yourself a favor. Stay away from that door, and whatever you do, don't listen to the whispers.